Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thanks for being here today. How are you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing well. And how about you?
I'm doing pretty great on this Wednesday morning. So I want to thank the listeners for tuning in today. And today on the Voice of Yoga, we will be talking about the deeper meaning behind Halloween. The word hallow means holy, which has its origins in the word whole, and Halloween was also called All Saints' Eve because saints were holy people. We'll also uncover the distinctions between saints and sinners, vice and virtue. So, Swami, let's start off with explaining to people what is the difference between a trick or a treat.
Yeah, that part I really haven't quite figured out how it all became, this trick or treat kind of, game that we play. But Halloween, like you say, the origins of Halloween was this whole thing of celebrating holy people, the whole thing of becoming a whole person. And, when you research Halloween, there's a lot of information about it that, it has its origins from the church. And then there are even earlier celebrations that even though some of the research says that they are not related, but it had its origins, with the Celtics and also pagan ceremonies. But the whole thing of the relationship between what I call matter and mind, I think, and the whole thing of how whole people that we always talk about, they have this broader sense of awareness and they see things differently. And so they understand, life from a broader perspective. And so this concept of Halloween, was a way of separating matter and mind. That underlying matter is this whole realm of energy. So the realms of, ghosts and goblins and spirits and all of that is a way of, honoring, our astral body, the astral plane, the whole realms of thought, mind. Just like what we talk about here, that how we think is what we become. That the physical world is a manifestation of our inner thought process. So it's the astral plane that actually is the template that the physical world conforms to.
I was just thinking while you were explaining that trick or treat is also something that we inevitably do to ourselves. We trick ourselves into thinking that, that we're spiritual, or, if I go down this path, this is what's going to, enable me to be more spiritual, things like that. So, what do you think about that? And then the treat part is, if we go down the right path, towards enlightenment, there is a big treat for us, at the end.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. The other thing is, how we trick ourselves with regard to the whole thing that we've created the victim, that we identify with, just the tangible, and so as a result, we don't have to take responsibility for the simple fact that, we're creating our reality on this deeper subjective level, that we're ordering everything that we're bringing into our lives, whether it be consciously, unconsciously, or karmically. So again, maybe the trick or treat is just like what you say. If you're not getting what it is that you're looking for, then somehow you're being tricked. And if you're able to manifest desired outcomes, then there's your treat. But yeah, the whole thing of Halloween and how at one time it might very well have been this very spiritual, kind of celebration of the revelation of how the inner world has such an impact on our reality. And, now, of course, it has kind of deteriorated into some sort of secular material meaning. And, it's all about having my hand out to get something. And if I don't get what I want, then, of course, I can retaliate, which is, I want to say, very telling for just, where we are collectively in our development.
I'd have to agree with that. But would you say that if we're tricking ourselves, would that also correlate to what you say, that we are missing the mark?
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly, what we talk about when we talk about avidya, ignorance, where we're mistaking the impermanent for the permanent. And even say, for example, I always think about like what the American transcendentalist would say, things like they would define man, or now you would probably have to say humanity, because you can't use those terms, but man is God playing fool. That in the beginning, man was divided into man was divided into men as the hand is divided into fingers. So the whole thing of the Buddhist concept of Maya, illusion, the illusion isn't that the physical world isn't real. The illusion is that the physical world is separate from these invisible forces. And so when we identify with the tangible and we're disassociated from the invisible and tangible and the invisible and intangible, then of course that's when we're missing the mark. Just like, what we had said, saints were considered to be whole people, people that had separated from this limited sense of self, from their attachment to the tangible parts, and connected to this invisible, intangible source. And they became something different. And sinners, the term sinners, were those that, were deceiving themselves, that were still attached to the tangible or the invisible and tangible aspects. Matter and mind, duality, fear and limitation.
So now what we have to do is try to get ourselves to recognize that we are looking for the right source of sustenance to alleviate us being tricked, I would say. And I know we talked about this last week. We talked about avidya, and how do we know if we're not using the right source of sustenance to sustain ourselves. Would that come down to what we talked about before, like desire?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. And also, there are other tangible, observable guidelines that come with it. The whole thing of using what you really do need as a symbol, that is associated with your peak experience feeling has a much different return than when you're using something that's visible and tangible or invisible and tangible. So in other words, there are very clear distinctions between worldly happiness, intellectual happiness, and eternal happiness. And just like you said, it is going to come down to, well, what do I desire? That's the like attracts like. And two things can't occupy the same space at the same time. And even, when you research, say, for example, the whole Celtic description of, this particular time of the year, that it was their new year. It was called Samhain, and it was, the new beginning. And they would dress up in costumes that were made from the remains of the game or the animals that they used to sustain their well-being. Because like we were saying, that humans in the adult state recognize their identity in the context of a broader sense of awareness, that the same soul that's animating me is animating everything that's out there. And so there is this sense of connectedness and also a sense of appreciation that comes with this broader sense of awareness. And so maybe that's where some of the things of, masquerading in costumes may have originated, because that is one of the things that we still try and do. Only there they did it to honor, the life that helped them sustain theirs, whereas here we kind of have our hand out and we're looking for something external.
That's interesting about that whole concept of masquerading, because sometimes I feel that is what we do, is that we put on this mask, and this mask prevents us from looking at our true self.
Yeah, exactly. The forces of the physical world are very strong. And then, the term has always been, associated with imprisonment, as opposed to the experience of getting out of that limited perspective was always associated with freedom or enlightenment. And like we talked last week, these barriers that we have to it, it's not something that we come in with the programming. It was something that we had to be taught how to do. You have to, first of all, recognize that we're complex beings, and we're dealing with these force fields and energy systems, these different dimensions of our makeup. Even, say, for example, Dante's Inferno, the whole thing of descending into the concept of hell. The whole thing of you have to divide and conquer before you can unite and stand, that we have to master the forces of a lower level before you can access the forces of the higher realms. And these are some of the things that just aren't in place right now. And then, of course, now we pretend to be doing better than we are. But the other thing is, like we had said, we don't have anything to measure it against, because there really isn't anything out there that is showing us anything different than we already know. And that's what's very different about what we're teaching people.
So we talked about that saints are whole people and sinners are people who miss the mark, as you say. Let's talk about vice and virtue. And I'd like to hear your explanation on what you believe makes one virtuous.
Yeah, those terms, again, they're just a lot of words. And again, virtue oftentimes has always been associated with conduct. And a lot of times it was conduct that was more in sync with the term that we would call being good. And the whole thing of vice. But the way that I really like to look at these words, these terms, would be more in sync with what Alice Bailey said in The Labors of Hercules when she mentions the origins of the word vice as meaning to render ineffectual. Because if you look at the things that we relate to as, our vices, it's usually about indulgence in substances that keep you trapped, and you're now controlled by these forces. And the whole thing of the ways she looked at the word virtue, as being virile and strong. Because, again, we look at it from the terms of our conduct, as opposed to what it is that we use to validate ourselves or to sustain ourselves. We don't look at it from the physics standpoint of it, and that's the way that we approach it. That being virtuous isn't necessarily all about your conduct as much as it is about your relationship with this indivisible, unified field. It is your connection to this source of sustenance that makes you become something different. So being virtuous in this model, being a whole person, you literally become virtuous by nature. You become good by nature. It's not something that you are trying to do. And that's oftentimes what you find is that most of us are trying to do it without this internal connection. And then that can become very frustrating because you don't have the power that comes with it. That's why the word virtue is associated with being, virility and strength. Mm-hmm. It's like we said, it's like trying to cut a tree down with a chainsaw without starting it up. Mm-hmm. You're working like crazy, but you're not getting any benefit from your equipment. And the same is true with trying to experience these lofty aspirations that are written about without this source of sustenance, without becoming something different.
I want to get back to that, but first I would like to hold that thought so we can pause to hear a word from our sponsors. So listeners, we will be back in a few moments.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate.
If you are looking for a Samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Kriya Yoga Series 1 live classes and videos. Get your arms around the spiritual science of Kriya Yoga.
The intention of why we practice is to embody spirit, to feel connected to the life force.
Kriya Yoga Asana live classes and videos. A cosmically engineered system of exercises to initiate apotheosis. A system of exercises engineered for dining and dancing at the Cosmic Ballroom. Kriya Yoga Series 2 live classes and videos. A practice in open form designed to facilitate positive growth of consciousness. Get your Labyrinth video.
I find the positive side of it is pulling a lot of things together.
Kriya Yoga mantra and meditation. With repetition comes absorption. Pray on prana and become divine.
At the same time, we all have a unique talent and gift to give back to the universe.
Private sessions. The mysteries of the universe have always been handed down verbally from teacher to student. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you are listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So before our break, we were talking about virtue and virility being strong and strength. And I also want to ask you, Swami, if you can give us your feelings about what you think about collectively what direction we are moving in.
Yeah, judging from what I see going on, it seems like we're spiraling downwards and backwards. That we're not really growing psychologically and spiritually. And especially if you use what I would call the tangible clues, and the first thing I would look at is our lifestyle. For just for openers, one of the things I always say is we don't think right. Then, you look at, where are our bad habits? We don't breathe right. There are plenty of us who may be hydrating ourselves, but the other thing is that, the foods that we eat produce cravings and disturbances. Talk about your vices. For substances that we're socialized to think that there's nothing wrong with, caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, refined sugars, and how they have just contaminated our civilization, have globally. And there's nothing intrinsically evil with these things other than the fact that, just coming back to the term evil, sin is an archery term. It means missing the mark. Evil is also an archery term, and it means anything that isn't the mark. And then, you cross-examine it with the texts, because there really is only one truth. There's only one God, there's only one yoga, there's only one religion, there's only one number one need. And the whole secret is to have that as your symbol for validation. And everything else misses the mark. And so collectively you can just see how off point we really are. And the relativity of it is, it's telling. And I always go back to what Ben Franklin said, the whole thing of, for the want of a nail, a shoe is lost. For the want of a shoe, a horse is lost. For the want of a horse, a rider is lost. For the want of a rider, a platoon is lost. For the want of a platoon, a battle is lost. And for the want of a battle, a war is lost. So something as monumental as a battle or a war is traced back to something as insignificant as the loss of a nail on a shoe. See, collectively, we're not paying attention to the details in our spiritual communities. We're not understanding, that this is an exact science. It's one of the things I always try and cross-reference it to is the whole thing of web design, or any type of computer language, is that they are very specific. If you're missing a comma or a period or you're one character off, then your design view doesn't equal your code view. You're not getting what it is that you want. And the same is true with being spiritual and the whole relationship between your mind and your body. And if you have not purified and perfected yourself mentally, then of course you will not have the same physical return. So again, it's all relativity. And collectively, I really kind of see that we are in dire straits of good leadership. And one of the reasons why we try and create this movement.
I think creating the movement starts with each person individually. And I love the Chinese proverb that you have posted on your homepage on your website. Can you recite that for our listeners?
Yeah, when there's light in the soul, there's beauty in the person. When there's beauty in the person, there's harmony in the home. When there's harmony in the home, there's honor in the nation. And when there's honor in the nation, there's peace in the world. It's all going to come down to, what does it look like when I have the light in my soul? And again, there are so many out there who think, whatever it is that they are doing is what we're talking about. And that's where the confusion lies. And again, until we really get better information into our mainstream collective medium, where we do narrow it down that you eliminate the anything goes mentality to there is only one truth. There's only one God. There's only one number one need. And the whole secret to life is to rebirth your body in it, to desire it. And then, of course, you can actually start to affect a global change.
Well, we're going to start closing down our program in just a moment or two, but before we get to the very end of the program, I want to take this opportunity to remind our listeners about our yoga retreat that's coming up in Costa Rica in February of next year. And I encourage you, if you have any questions about it or want to learn about the dates and all the information, visit the website at www.ipdtransform.com, and you can get all the contact information to reach us for any questions that you might have. So, Swami, next week we were talking about that we were going to discuss the full moon in Taurus. Do you want to give us maybe just a bit of a heads up as to what we can expect to talk about next week?
Yeah, that full moon that's coming up on November 6th it's also the full moon phase for the solar eclipse that happened on May 9th, 2013. So it has a little bit more to it, and we'll try and go into some of the benefits and uses that you can have with this particular configuration.
Great. So in closing, I want to invite our listeners to reach us on all the avenues of social media. There's Twitter. And, of course, I just mentioned our website earlier. So, contact us if you have any questions or curiosities and questions, because Swami does like to hear from you and we'll respond. We also have live online classes. You can get that information as well from our website. So before we go, Swami, any final thoughts about Halloween?
Yeah, I would recommend that try to get away from the whole thing of candy and the association of sugar with the day, because it will definitely keep you embroiled in the regressive cycle. And I would like to invite people to join our spiritual advance and wish everybody a good day. And with that, I will say namaste.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, sugar is definitely something we want to avoid. That will keep us in the trick phase for sure. So thank you, listeners, for tuning in to our program, The Voice of Yoga. I am Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.